Nobody inside the palace expected this. In less than one silent moment, a royal guard witnessed something so disturbing, so unbelievable, that it shattered every rule he ever lived by. What he saw a young princess endure would push him past protocol, past fear, and straight into the most dangerous decision of his life. Stay with me, because this story only gets wilder. Like the video and subscribe now. The wind moved softly across Aldmere Palace's lower courtyard, drifting through the carved archways and brushing the tops of trimmed hedges. It was a quiet hour, the kind that existed only between large royal engagements. No press, no crowds, only the faint shuffle of attendants preparing a small private gathering inside the conservatory. Silver trays clinked, distant voices murmured, and sunlight painted long shadows across the ancient stone paths. Sergeant Idran Cole walked his movement rotation along the south archway with measured discipline. His boots struck the ground in perfect cadence, a rhythm earned over 13 years as a member of the Royal Guard of Aldmere. His uniform remained immaculate, his posture straight, and his rifle secure and polished. Nothing about him appeared unusual to a casual observer, yet Idran did more than stand watch. He studied silence. He read tension. He counted breaths. Protection required far more than strength. It demanded observation. He noticed something near the courtyard's center. A small figure sat on a stone bench tucked neatly between two hedges. Princess Leora, 10 years old, the youngest royal of Aldmere, rested with a book open across her lap. Her hands held the pages lightly, but her eyes did not follow the lines of text. Her posture remained unusually rigid, her chin lowered just enough to hide her expression. She looked calm, but Idran's instincts stirred. Children rarely sat so still unless they tried to conceal an emotion. Idran did not approach. His duty required distance, but not ignorance. He shifted his pacing route subtly, allowing himself a clear angle without breaking formation. Princess Leora inhaled, slow and shallow, as though she attempted to steady herself. A page of her book fluttered in the breeze, but she did not lift her hand to secure it. She seemed focused on something far across the courtyard. Idran followed her gaze. On the upper terrace, 3 young nobles stood near the railing, whispering among themselves. Their eyes flicked toward her, then toward each other, followed by hushed laughter. Their expressions carried neither kindness nor innocence. Idran recognized one of them immediately. Lady Seraphine, daughter of Queen Marianne, held a delicate fan loosely at her side. She appeared amused, but her amusement did not resemble joy. It resembled superiority. Idran felt the shift in the air. He had seen such behavior before, in places far less ceremonial than a palace. Bullying, subtle as a shadow, but sharp as a blade. Royal protocols did not allow him to intervene unless someone faced immediate danger, but his training demanded awareness. Princess Leora closed her book with deliberate quiet, rose from the bench, and walked toward the glass house behind the courtyard. It was a small structure filled with rare plants, a place where she often hid when her lessons overwhelmed her. Idran watched her retreat, small and careful. Like a child trying not to disturb a world determined to misunderstand her, the laughter from the terrace faded, replaced by footsteps descending the north stairwell. Lady Seraphine and her companions crossed the courtyard, their movement too synchronized to be accidental. Idran adjusted his position once again. His body remained still, but tension threaded through his muscles. Princess Leora moved into the glass house. Unaware that the trio followed her at a distance, Idran shifted his pace into the angled corridor. His movement stayed ceremonial, yet more purposeful. He had no evidence of wrongdoing, so he could not act, but he could observe closely. He approached the conservatory's outer edge, just as the glass house door closed behind the group of nobles through the transparent panels. Idran saw Princess Leora standing near the small pond inside the structure. She clutched a tiny embroidered pouch, a keepsake from her grandmother. Lady Seraphine stepped forward, her fan tapping rhythmically against her palm. The other nobles lingered behind her, silent but complicit. Their expressions sharpened. Their conversation appeared muted by the thick glass, but Idran understood enough from their gestures. Princess Leora backed away. Her hands trembled slightly. Her pouch slipped, caught and trembled at her fingertips. Idran's heart tightened. He remembered years of standing motionless during ceremonies while his mind drifted back to his early days as an enlisted recruit. When he saw similar cruelty unfold among trainees who believed rank justified harm, he remembered the helplessness he felt then, bound by rules that valued order over compassion. He had sworn that he would never again ignore a child in distress. Lady Serafini reached forward. Her hand moved quickly. Princess Leora's pouch fell into her grasp. A triumphant smirk crossed her face. Idran stepped closer to the glass wall. His training roared quietly inside him. Every regulation demanded patience, but every instinct demanded action. Princess Leora attempted to retrieve her pouch, but Lady Seraphine extended her arm above the water. A thin ripple moved across the pond's surface as she let the pouch drop. The splash echoed faintly, followed by Princess Leora's sharp inhale. Idran stopped pacing. He did not break protocol yet, but the moment had arrived. A moment that would test every line between duty and humanity. And Idran Cole chose humanity. The glass house shimmered beneath the afternoon light, its curved panels reflecting fragments of sky, stone, and shadow. Idran stood just beyond the outer frame, his pulse steady but powerful. Years of training urged him to stay calm, to assess before he acted, to remember that the uniform on his back represented order, restraint, and protocol. Yet the sight before him struck with the force of a memory he had buried long ago. Inside, Princess Leora stood frozen near the pond, her eyes wide with disbelief as the embroidered pouch sank beneath the lilies. The water rippled around the falling keepsake until it disappeared into the dimness below. Lady Seraphine did not show remorse. Her chin lifted slightly, her expression a mask of indifference sharpened by pride. The two nobles beside her exchanged uneasy glances, clearly aware that a line had been crossed. Yet too loyal to Seraphine, or too afraid of her to intervene. For a moment, Idran allowed himself to breathe deeply. That breath became a boundary. He had protected the royal household from storms, crowds, and political threats. However, the greatest threats rarely came from outside the palace walls. They rose from unchecked authority, from small cruelties. From people who believed their titles shielded them from accountability. Idran lifted his gloved hand and stepped through the door. The nobles jumped slightly as he entered, startled by the sudden presence of a guard who seemed far too deliberate to be performing routine oversight. Lady Seraphine stiffened, her fan closing sharply with a snap that echoed against the glass walls. "Sergeant Cole," she said, her voice smooth but laced with irritation. "There is no need for your presence here. You may return to your post." Idran did not step back. His eyes moved first to Princess Leora, who stood silently with her fingers woven tightly together. Her breathing shook slightly, though she held her posture as best she could. She had always carried herself with dignity that exceeded her age. But dignity had limits when cruelty pressed against it. Idran turned his full attention back to the trio. "Lady Seraphini," he said evenly. "A royal guard is permitted to intervene when a member of the royal household faces distress." "There is no distress," Seraphine replied quickly. "We were simply speaking with her." One of the nobles shifted uneasily. Another dropped her gaze to the floor. Idran took a single step forward, not threatening, not aggressive, but unmistakably firm. "Then I must ask you to leave the glass house immediately, so Princess Leora may recover her property?" Seraphine's jaw tightened. Recover her property? She glanced at the pond and let out a soft, mocking exhale. It slipped. That is all. Oh, the lie sat heavy in the air. Princess Leora finally lifted her head. Her eyes held no anger. Hurt. Deep, quiet hurt that children rarely voiced because they believed it would burden the adults around them. She did not speak, but her silence spoke for her. Idran felt something inside him shift. He stepped between Seraphine and Leora with a controlled authority that left no room for challenge. "Your Highness." Addressing Leora, "Please wait behind me." Seraphine's fan trembled slightly in her grip. This was no longer about a pouch. It was about boundaries, dignity, and accountability. Something she had rarely been forced to face. "You forget your place, Sergeant," she hissed. "My mother is Queen Marian. You answer to her." "I answer to the crown," Idran replied. "And the crown requires protection of every royal child." Seraphine's cheeks flushed. Anger swelled in her eyes, fueled by entitlement rather than righteousness. At that moment, the glass house door opened again. The rustle of robes swept across the threshold as Queen Marian stepped inside. Her arrival silenced the room instantly, graceful, composed, and observant. She carried an authority that needed no announcement. Her gaze moved from Idran to Princess Leora to the nobles, and finally to her daughter. "What is happening here?" she asked, her tone calm but edged with unmistakable seriousness. Seraphine stepped forward. "Mother, he is overstepping. We were simply talking, and he barged in as though we had done something wrong." Queen Marianne turned her attention to Idran. "Sergeant, explain." Idran did not hesitate. He never raised his voice. He never pointed blame with dramatics. He simply spoke with clarity. "Princess Leora's property fell into the pond," he said. "She appears distressed. I believed it was necessary to intervene." Marian narrowed her eyes slightly, reading the space, reading her daughter, reading the trembling shadows of guilt in the room. She had ruled long enough to know that truth rarely arrived wrapped neatly. It arrived as tension, as silence. As the subtleties people tried so desperately to hide, she lowered her gaze to Princess Leora. "Is this correct, my dear?" Leora hesitated, not because she wished to lie, but because she feared consequences that had followed her before. Her throat tightened. Her hands trembled. Idran stepped subtly closer. "You may speak freely, Princess," he said. "No harm will come to you." Something in the way he said it unlocked the smallest breath of courage inside her. She nodded faintly. Marianne saw everything in that nod, a truth Seraphine hoped to bury, a burden Leora hoped to carry alone, and a guard who refused to ignore the quiet suffering of a child. The room fell completely still. A decision was forming. A confrontation was approaching. And for the first time in her life, Princess Leora would not face it alone. A stillness settled over the glass house. Delicate yet heavy, like a veil lowered across a stage moments before a truth must be spoken. Queen Marianne stood at the center of that stillness, her presence calm but commanding. The nobles near Seraphine shifted nervously, sensing that the atmosphere had changed. Princess Leora stood behind Idran, her small hands pressed together, her breath tight against her chest. Idran remained steady, his posture strong, but his eyes gentle upon the young princess he had sworn to protect. "Seraphine," Queen Marianne said softly, "I will ask again. What happened in this room?" Lady Seraphine lifted her chin. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who believed her position sheltered her from consequences. For years it had. Her upbringing, her social circle, and even her own expectations had strengthened the belief that words spoken by others mattered less than the words she shaped for her own defense. "Nothing happened," she said. "Princess Leora lost her pouch. That is all." Her answer was clean, polished, and empty. It had the precision of someone who practiced such defenses often. Queen Marianne studied her daughter's face. She saw the calculated composure, the lack of remorse, the quick tone that spoke more of fear of punishment than recognition of wrongdoing. Something inside the queen deepened. A question, a concern, an unfamiliar ache. She turned to Leora. "Princess," she said gently, "you may tell me exactly what you wish. I will hear it." Leora shifted her weight slightly. The glass house felt warmer now, as though the sunlight had intensified only for her discomfort. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her eyes drifted to the pond, where faint ripples still moved across the surface. "I did not drop it," she whispered. The room tightened. Seraphine's eyes widened with surprise, not because she felt guilt, but because she had not expected Leora to speak against her. The other nobles stiffened. Idran remained motionless, but his heart steadied with relief that Leora had found her voice. Queen Marianne knelt to meet the princess at eye level. "Then how did it fall?" she asked softly. Leora swallowed. She looked down at her hands, Her voice barely rose above a whisper, but its honesty carried more weight than any accusation could. Lady Seraphine took it from me. The words fell into the air like stones into deep water. Ripples spread through every expression in the room. Seraphine's composure cracked for the first time. She inhaled sharply. "That is not true," she said, stepping forward. She must have misunderstood. She often misunderstands things. Idran's jaw tightened. He had heard similar statements used to silence children across military bases and orphan shelters. He had never tolerated such dismissals. He spoke before anyone else could. "Her account is correct," Idran said. "I observed Lady Seraphine remove the pouch from Princess Leora and release it into the pond." Seraphine spun toward him. "You dare accuse me?" "I state only what I witnessed," Idran replied. Marian rose to her full height. She did not shout, but her voice carried a new gravity. "Seraphine," she said, "is this true?" Seraphine glanced toward her companions, hoping they would echo her version of the story. The first noble looked away, guilt tightening her features. The second swallowed hard, then stepped slightly backward as if fear might distance her from responsibility. "Seraphine," Marian repeated. Panic flickered in Seraphine's eyes. "Why must everyone blame me? Princess Leora always receives attention. I only wanted her to behave as a princess should. She ruins gatherings with her quiet nature. She avoids people. She acts special in ways she does not deserve." Each sentence unraveled the image Seraphine had tried to maintain. Her frustrations spilled out, revealing resentment rather than justification. Queen Marianne felt her heart constrict. She had raised Seraphine with love, yet she suddenly understood how privilege, lack of guidance, and unchecked praise had shaped her daughter's behavior. The queen felt disappointment, not anger. Responsibility, not rage. She approached Seraphine slowly. "My daughter," she said softly, "I see pain in your words, but pain does not grant permission to harm another child. Princess Leora is a guest in this palace. Her quiet nature is not a flaw. It is a strength." Seraphine stepped back, eyes trembling as she realized her mother believed the truth spoken against her. Idran stepped slightly forward, placing himself between the tension and the child behind him. Leora's breathing steadied as she saw the guard's unwavering stance. For the first time, she did not feel alone in a moment she believed she had to endure silently. "Sergeant Cole," Marian said. "Thank you." Her voice carried sincerity, gratitude, and something else. Recognition. Recognition of a man who upheld his oath, not only by force, but by compassion. The queen turned back to Seraphine. "You will leave the glass house and reflect on your actions. I will speak with you privately after I ensure Princess Leora is unharmed." Seraphine opened her mouth to argue, but her mother's tone allowed no space for defiance. She lowered her head and walked toward the door. Her steps heavy with realization. The moment she left, the air shifted again, lighter. Softer Manny faced Idran and Leora. "Let us recover the pouch," she said. But Idran already prepared to step toward the water. For the first time in her young life, Princess Leora felt seen. Not because she held a royal title, not because she belonged to a large family, but because someone chose to stand beside her when she believed she had to stand alone, and that single moment would shape everything. That came next. The pond inside the glass house reflected the fractured shapes of leaves above it. Shimmering softly beneath the afternoon light, Princess Leora stepped closer, her eyes fixed on the dark patch below the lilies where her grandmother's embroidered pouch had disappeared. The water looked calm, but the moment that placed the pouch at the bottom had shaken her more than she wished to admit. Idran approached the edge, removing his gloves with slow precision. His movements remained steady, deliberate, entirely present. Queen Marianne watched him closely, impressed by the unwavering dignity he carried even in situations that tested his patience and restraint. "Your Highness," Idran said to Leora, "may I retrieve it for you?" Leora looked at him with a mixture of relief and uncertainty. "Yes," she whispered. "Please." Idran nodded once. He set his rifle safely against a bench, rolled up his sleeves with controlled care. and stepped into the shallow edge of the pond. The water barely reached his ankles at first, but it deepened near the central lilies. With slow movements he waded forward, the surface rippling in soft circles with each step. Leora watched him closely, her eyes following the firmness in his posture. She had always believed that guards were simply silent figures, who protected the palace with stoic expressions and rigid routines. But Idran did not feel distant. He felt present, human, steady in a way that made her feel safe. Queen Marianne approached her gently. "Are you hurt, my dear?" she asked. Leora shook her head. "Not hurt. Just confused. I never understand why some people choose unkindness." Marianne sighed softly, the weight of a mother and queen settling on her shoulders. "Sometimes people lose their way when they begin to believe that their title matters more than their compassion." Leora considered this, her brows lowering thoughtfully. "But Seraphine is older. Should she not know better?" "She should," Marianne admitted. "But knowing better requires a heart that listens. Not everyone chooses to listen." Idran reached beneath the lilies. His fingers brushed something soft. He lifted the soaked pouch with care, water streaming from its threads. Despite the damage, the embroidery remained intact, each stitch crafted years ago by loving hands. He stepped out of the pond and knelt before Leora, presenting the pouch with quiet respect. "It is safe," he said. Leora took it from him gently, cupping it against her chest. "Thank you, Sergeant." Her gratitude was soft, but it carried a strength that Idran recognized. She spoke not as a princess expecting obedience, but as a child acknowledging kindness. Marianne smiled faintly. "Sergeant Cole, your actions today are beyond commendation. You upheld your duty with integrity." Idran bowed his head. "It is my honor, Your Majesty." Marianne's gaze softened. "I believe you understand something many overlook. Protection does not end at defending a life. Sometimes it begins with defending a heart." Idran did not respond, but something subtle shifted in his expression. A flicker of memory, a flash of a younger version of himself watching an injustice he had not been allowed to challenge. The moment that shaped the promise he now lived by. Leora clutched her pouch tighter. "Sergeant," she said, "may I ask you something?" "You may ask anything you wish, Princess." "Do people choose to be cruel?" she asked quietly, "or do they simply forget kindness?" Idran considered the question carefully. He never rushed answers, especially when speaking to a child who carried more thoughtfulness than many adults. "I believe cruelty grows where guidance disappears," he said. "Kindness must be taught, but it must also be shown. If someone never learns to value it, they may forget that it matters." Leora nodded slowly. Marianne rested a hand on Leora's shoulder. "Come, let us walk. I wish to speak with both of you." They stepped out of the glass house into the warmth of the courtyard. The palace grounds shimmered with soft gold light, the air filled with the distant song of garden birds settling for the late afternoon. Marianne walked gracefully beside them, her pace slow and reflective. "Sergeant Cole," she began, "your service record speaks of discipline and loyalty. But today I saw something deeper. You understand responsibility not as a rule, but as a calling." Idran listened respectfully. "You stood between harm and a child who believed she had no voice. That choice requires courage." Idran looked forward, not seeking praise. "A guard who ignores suffering is no guard at all, Your Majesty."
I'm Marianne.
Marianne smiled softly at his humility. "I agree, and that is why I intend to appoint you to a new role." Idran paused mid-step. "A new role?" "Yes," Marianne said. "Princess Leora has endured far too many quiet struggles, many of which I regret not seeing sooner. I wish for you to serve as her primary protector." Leora gasped softly, her eyes widening in surprise. Idran straightened. The honor was immense, yet he did not accept lightly. "Your Majesty, I will serve her with every strength I possess." Marianne nodded. "I believe you will." Leora looked up at Idran with a small but bright spark of relief. For the first time, she felt seen, valued, and supported by someone who understood her without needing explanations. but neither of them knew that the events of this day were only the beginning, because Seraphine's resentment had not faded. It had grown. And trouble rarely remained quiet inside palace walls. The evening sun stretched long amber beams across the palace corridors, turning polished marble floors into rivers of gold. Aldmere Palace rarely felt this quiet after dusk. Servants moved softly, guards rotated posts with disciplined precision, and the day's tension slowly drifted into the still air. Yet beneath that calm, something unsettled remained. It moved like an unseen shadow, quiet but growing. Sergeant Idran Cole accompanied Princess Leora through the Western Passage, fulfilling his new role with deliberate care. He walked a respectful distance from her, far enough to allow comfort, close enough to provide assurance. Leora held her grandmother's pouch tightly against her side, its fabric still faintly damp but safe. Her steps were slow, but her shoulders rested in a way Idran had never seen before. For the first time she walked without fear that someone might wait around a corner with whispered mockery or a cruel smirk. "Sergeant," she said softly, "will Queen Marianne speak with Lady Seraphine tonight?" "Yes, Princess," Idran replied. "The Queen wishes to guide her toward understanding." Leora lowered her gaze thoughtfully. "I hope she will listen." Idran admired that. Even after unkindness, Leora wished for healing, not punishment. Children often forgave more easily than adults, but Leora's forgiveness came from empathy, not submission. As they continued down the corridor, Idran sensed movement behind a column. A soft shift, subtle, but noticeable to trained senses. His steps slowed, his eyes narrowing slightly, then Lady Seraphine emerged. Her posture carried no anger, only a quiet intensity that Idran had not seen before. The sharp edges of entitlement had softened, replaced by something else: confusion, embarrassment, and perhaps a small thread of shame she had never dealt with until this day. "Princess Leora," Seraphine said, her voice low. Leora stopped, clutching her pouch again. Idran stepped half a pace forward, positioning himself protectively but not aggressively. Seraphine hesitated. Her face revealed the internal struggle of someone who had been confronted with truth but did not yet know how to hold it. "I wish to speak with her," Seraphine said to Idran, "and I must ensure her safety." Idran responded calmly. "I mean no harm," Seraphine added quickly. "I understand what you think of me." Idran did not answer. He observed. Seraphine turned to Leora, drawing a slow breath. "I wish to explain. Or perhaps apologize. I am not certain which I can manage yet." Leora looked uncertain but curious. Idran watched the exchange closely, ready to intervene but willing to allow growth if genuine. Seraphine stepped forward carefully. "I behaved poorly today. I knew it the moment I saw my mother look at me as if she suddenly saw a stranger. I did not expect that, and it unsettled me." Leora shifted her weight, unsure how to respond. Seraphine continued, her voice quieter now. "People treat me as though I have value only because I am royalty. They praise me even when I contribute nothing. They tell me I am powerful even when I do nothing of worth. I believe that made me superior." Leora frowned slightly. "Did that make you feel happy?" "No," Seraphine admitted. "Only hollow," answered surprised Leora. Idran watched the exchange with a cautious hope that Seraphine might be ready for reflection rather than defense. "I thought if I controlled people," Seraphine said, "then perhaps I would feel strong. But strength without kindness feels empty. I understand that now." Leora stepped slightly closer, her eyes softening. She was gentle by nature, and empathy came to her as naturally as breath. "I did not want you to feel hollow," Leora said. "I only wanted peace." A quiet tremor crossed Seraphine's lips. She lowered her gaze. "I am sorry." The apology felt real. It trembled with honesty rather than performance. But Idran knew that a single apology did not erase a pattern. Healing required more than words. Leora nodded slowly. "I accept your apology." Seraphine blinked with startled relief. Idran stepped forward, maintaining calm authority. "Princess Leora has forgiven you, but forgiveness must be followed by change." Seraphine met his eyes. I know. I intend to try. She stepped back, gathering herself as though each confession had taken more energy than she expected. The Queen asked to speak with me after supper. She said, I will go, and I will listen. Leora offered a small smile. I hope it goes well. Seraphine gave a slight bow toward both of them, then walked down the corridor with a posture far different from earlier. The defensiveness had dropped. The pride had softened. She walked slowly, as though the weight she carried had changed shape. When she disappeared around the corner, Leora released a long breath. Sergeant, she said, is it difficult for people to change? Idran considered his answer with sincerity. Change requires courage. Not all people choose courage, but those who do can reshape their lives. Leora nodded thoughtfully. I want her to change. Not for me, but for herself. Your compassion is rare, Princess, Idran said, and it is powerful. They resumed their walk. The palace seemed quieter now, but the silence felt purposeful rather than tense. Leora walked closer to Idran than before, not out of fear, but out of trust. As they approached the grand staircase, Idran noticed Queen Marian waiting at the top. Her expression held a calm strength, but beneath it lay a trace of sadness that she had not noticed her daughter's troubles sooner, and sadness for the quiet pain Leora had carried. Princess Leora, Marianne said, your evening meal has been prepared. Afterward, I wish to speak with you privately. Leora bowed her head. Of course, Your Majesty. Marianne placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, then looked toward Idran. Sergeant Cole, she said, a matter has arisen. I will require your counsel. Idran bowed. I am ready, Your Majesty. Marianne's voice softened. There are deeper patterns in this palace than what we witness today. Patterns that must be addressed before they harm more than one child. Idran felt the weight of her words. He understood that this day had sparked a change. A change often shook the foundation before it rebuilt it. Tonight, truths would surface. Tonight, decisions would shape the future of Aldmere, and Idran Cole would stand at the center of it. Not as a guard alone, but as a voice for those who needed one. Night settled over Aldmere Palace with a slow, silken hush, turning the sky deep blue and scattering early stars across the horizon. Lanterns glowed warmly along the corridors, their soft light reflected off stone floors, stretching into quiet hallways where secrets lived, where truths had long waited for a voice strong enough to speak them. Sergeant Idran Cole walked beside Queen Marian toward her private council chamber. His boots moved with steady weight, but his mind remained focused on the events of the day. He had always believed duty meant following orders and protecting the throne, but today had shifted something inside him. Duty was not a chain. It was a calling to lift what had fallen, defend what was fragile, strengthen what was meant to endure. When they entered the chamber, the Queen dismissed her attendants. Only Idran remained, Sergeant Marian said, her voice gentle but heavy. What you witnessed today was not an isolated act. It revealed something deeper within the palace. Idran listened attentively. When children behave with cruelty, she continued, it often reflects something they learned or something they lacked. Idran nodded. Guidance, Your Majesty. Yes, Marian said. Guidance and examples. A palace filled with formality but deprived of empathy can shape hearts in harmful ways. Seraphine is not cruel at her core. She is misguided. Idran appreciated the Queen's wisdom. Punishment alone never healed a heart. Recognition and redirection required far greater strength. Marianne stepped closer to the window, observing the moonlit gardens below. I believed I provided her with enough love. However, I now see that love without boundaries becomes permission, and permission without purpose becomes entitlement. Idran lowered his head respectfully. Your Majesty, I offer my service in any capacity required. Marian turned back to him. I request your counsel, Sergeant. You witnessed the moment with clarity. Tell me honestly, what does Seraphine need most? Idran took a measured breath before answering. Truth, he said. She needs truth delivered firmly, but without humiliation. She must understand that kindness strengthens her, not weakens her. She must learn that leadership is not control, but compassion. Marian listened quietly, her eyes attentive. "And Princess Leora?" she asked next. "What does she need?" Idran answered without hesitation. "Safety, consistency, a voice that reminds her she is valued. She is gentle, but she is not fragile. She simply needs someone who sees her." Marian smiled faintly, sorrow woven through her gratitude. "Then you shall remain by her side, Sergeant Cole," she said. "Not only as a guard, but as an anchor. You understand her silence. That is rare." Idran bowed his head. "I will serve her loyally." A knock sounded at the chamber door. Marian called for the visitor to enter. Lady Seraphine stepped inside. Her steps were slow, her posture tense. Her eyes rimmed with the exhaustion of someone who had been forced to face a part of herself she never wished to see. Gone was the fan, the sharp expressions, the cold confidence. She appeared smaller, not in stature, but in certainty. Marian gestured for her to approach. "Seraphine," she said gently, "this is not punishment. This is reflection." Seraphine lifted her gaze. "Mother, I have disappointed you." "You have disappointed yourself," Marian corrected softly. "But disappointment is not an end. It is an invitation to change." Seraphine swallowed. Her voice trembled. "I acted from jealousy. I believed Princess Leora received admiration I earned. I believed her quiet nature made her weak. I see now that I misunderstood her strength." Idran watched her closely. This was not the smooth defense she crafted earlier. This was honest surrender. Marian approached her daughter and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Seraphine, you must learn that cruelty does not lift you. It diminishes everything you hope to become." Seraphine nodded, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. "I understand. I will change." Marian looked at Idran. "Sergeant Cole will guide us in creating a safer palace environment. He will serve as Princess Leora's protector, but he will also help monitor conduct among palace youth." Seraphine's eyes widened slightly, but she showed no resentment. "Only responsibility." "I will cooperate," she said, "and I will apologize to Princess Leora again. This time without fear of judgment. I only hope she can forgive me." Idran stepped forward. "Forgiveness begins with sincerity. You have shown sincerity today." Seraphine bowed her head. Marian exhaled with quiet relief. "Then let this be the beginning of change." Seraphine left the chamber. The door closed behind her. Silence filled the room again. Marian turned to Idran. "You have changed more today than you realize." A guard intervened. A child found her voice. "A princess confronted her cruelty, and I saw my own shortcomings as a mother and queen." "Your Majesty," Idran said with firmness, "growth comes from humility. Your humility will shape this palace." The queen smiled. Later that night, Idran escorted Princess Leora to her study for her evening reading. She settled into her chair, the pouch resting safely beside her. The glow of 2 lanterns illuminated her face. "Sergeant," she said quietly, "did I cause trouble today?" Idran shook his head. "You revealed truth, Princess. Truth never causes trouble. It only uncovers what needs healing." Leora studied his words. "I was afraid to speak earlier. Courage is not absence of fear," Idran replied. "Courage is action in spite of fear. You acted bravely today." A small, genuine smile touched her lips. "Thank you for standing with me." "This is my honor," Idran said. "I stand with you because every child deserves protection, and every heart deserves kindness." Leora looked down at her pouch, running her fingers across the embroidery. "My grandmother told me that kindness is the greatest strength in the world." "She was correct," Idran said. "Kindness changes people, even those who seem unreachable." Leora nodded. "I hope Seraphine will change too." "She has started already," Idran said gently. The palace felt different now. Lighter. A place where truth had finally been spoken. Where healing had begun, its slow but steady work. And somewhere deep inside those old stone walls, honor stood taller than it had in years, because one guard chose compassion over silence. One princess chose courage over fear. One queen chose guidance over denial, and one troubled young noble chose reflection over pride. Aldmere would never be the same.